And we're live, streaming to you from Founders Park in historic Ocean Grove, New Jersey. We are Music Matters with Jason Tramm. We're so delighted that you could join us for our unique podcast community, where we explore the triumphs and challenges of the performing arts world as seen through the eyes of distinguished colleagues. Thank you so much for helping us to grow into the world's leading musical culture podcast, where we interview artists from a wide variety of genres from across the musical divide, and we talk about artistic innovation and self-discovery during the most challenging of times. You can please like us on social media. You can smash that bell icon on YouTube and subscribe to us. We love that. You can join our mailing list on our website at www.jasontram.net. Our guests today are really excited. We have a married couple, two distinguished artists. We have Allison Brewster Franzetti, who's a concert pianist, and she has played with a variety of symphonies across the world. She's a multi-time Grammy nominee and recording artist, and we're delighted she's here today. And we also have Carlos Franzetti, a distinguished composer in a variety of genres. He's written pieces that have been performed by the Boston Pops, the Brooklyn Philharmonic, and many, many, many others. He's done film scores such as Beat Street, Misunderstood, and Mambo King, which I love personally. And he's been nominated for, I think we just said in the pre-show, 18 different Grammy Awards, and he's won a variety as well. So an incredible couple of married artists. Welcome to the Franzettis.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Yeah,
it's a pleasure to have you on Music Matters, and I've certainly known of your work. I've met Allison before, but I haven't met you in person yet, Carlos, but I've heard wonderful things from so many mutual friends.
Well, thank you, and wonderful friends and wonderful musicians, and what can I say? I mean, this has been a long career in my life, and I guess I'm getting the harvest of it, and it's been a wonderful ride. So, but I'm still here and planning new things, and with my lovely wife, we work together a lot. We have been doing that for almost 30 years, 27 years that we met and that we've been married. And what can I say? It's wonderful to be able to contribute to the piano repertoire with a fantastic concert pianist such as Allison. I've written 2 piano concertos.
Well, yeah, right? And then we adapted one.
And then we adapted a guitar concerto into a piano concerto. It's a smaller orchestra, but anyway, we do a lot of work together. We're like a little bit like Abba and Costello.
Well, that's wonderful. What an incredible way to share.
Okay.
For the young people.
That's not exactly
the young people might not know.
I would have thought of, but okay.
They work
together. I mean, what an incredible way to share that gift, that love, through music and through your lives, and what an incredible story. So I can't wait to jump into this. So let's go through each of your stories. Did you always know that each of you wanted to become an artist? So Allison, why don't you go first? Did you always know you wanted to be an artist? And when did you start your musical journey?
I don't remember when I started. I got to tell you, I am told that I was 2 when I started playing. So yeah, I've been at it a long time. That I never did the baby thing of going bang, bang, bang. That I evidently figured out how to play. I have perfect pitch, so I could play anything that I heard in any key I wanted, major or minor, whatever I wanted to do with it. My grandmother taught piano for 55 years in Elizabeth, New Jersey. When I was about 6, she had told my mom that I was beyond what she could do, and they took me to Juilliard for a consultation. And we go pretty much from there. Would I say I always knew I wanted to do this? There are times when I tried to walk away from it a couple of times. I will be really honest about that, and it's true. I did try, and I never could do that. It was kind of like, no matter what, it had me. I had to do this. There was nothing else really that I ever truly wanted to do, although I may have toyed with the idea a couple of times. But I just had to. And this is something I talk to parents about a lot with children who really do have that thing, like Carlos says that you have, that I have, that you just have to. And I've said to parents, when that's your child, and they just have to. There's nobody and nothing that's actually going to stop that journey. That is just the way it's going to be. And you got to just know that that's just the way it is. It's almost like we don't choose it, it chooses us. And I kind of believe in metaphysics.
And the gods of the internet were not kind. We lost sound for a second, but we are back with our incredible guests, Allison and Carlos Franzetti. And Allison was talking about her lifelong journey with music, started at such a young age, and she was saying a few things. The 2 times in life she considered going a different path, but then, like that line in The Godfather, just when I got out, he pulled me back in. So the music has that power, right, doesn't it?
It really does. What I was starting to say before the internet gods were cruel to us is that it's not even whether we choose it. It chooses us. And that's what I was saying before, that I tell parents of my students, for those who really want to go for this, there's nothing and nobody that's going to talk them out of it. And that parents might as well get used to the idea and be as supportive as possible, because guess what? Their kids can do it. And for those who don't, you know what? That's also fine too, because hopefully what we've instilled in them is a lifelong love and appreciation and hopefully support of music, both live and recorded.
We certainly know that as an educator myself, like that, but music teaches so many things other than just music. We have the discipline factor, the how it teaches us lessons for life, how to work with other people. I mean, it's such a valuable thing, even if you don't make a career out of it.
Absolutely. And I have had a couple thank you notes recently that have talked about exactly that thing. What you said about teaching life skills, that and I've kept those notes because I'm just so touched that these students who had worked with me thought enough to actually take the time to send a handwritten note, which in this day and age, people will text you, people will email you, which is totally fine. We all do it. I do it. But to take the time to write it and send it so that you can keep it is something that's a skill that's kind of long gone, and I'm happy to see that it still exists.
What if Puccini only had texts, and we wouldn't have all that voluminous correspondence, which was so important to all of us when we study these great composers?
Or Clara Schumann. I mean, talk
Beethoven,
about
sure.
luminous, all that correspondence that we look at and we're like, wow, we can really follow this person's life and the things that they went through in a way that we've kind of lost that, and it's kind of sad.
Now, your career has taken you so many different places. You attended Manhattan and Juilliard and did your doctorate at Rutgers, and you've been to so many prestigious places. What are some of the lessons you learned in a lifetime of performance?
To always listen to other people and to have respect for everyone's point of view, and that we all have our life experiences that we bring to this, and we are a community, and how important that is. I mean, this is the basis of how Carlos and I got together, frankly, was we met musically. We met as a, Carlos, can you hear? Okay.
Yes. I'm getting rid of something.
We met professionally. And so our opinions of each other as musicians, because people have asked us this too, were formed on a professional basis before we ever got together as a couple. So, and Carlos and I have completely different backgrounds. All right. So I'm going to let Carlos jump in on that momentarily. I'm born in Brooklyn, raised in New Jersey, went to school here, did the whole 10 yards of music conservatory, as you alluded to, then moved to London for a number of years to study there and came back. So, but again, our family backgrounds, where we grew up, how we grew up, we're different religions, all that. And yet we have this interesting common ground, which is how we got started. So Carlos, jump in on that, because I've talked, I think, enough right now.
Here, Carlos, you don't have a New Jersey accent. Why don't you tell us about your journey?
But I always say, where's your accent from? I said, deep south. So you can't get any deeper than going south than Argentina. So I mean, it's the end of the line. But otherwise, you go to Antarctica. But that's where my accent comes from. And I mean, Allison is right. We have different backgrounds, totally different. And it brings us to the common denominator, which is the only universal language that exists on this earth, which is music. And it's not so because somebody in Bombay can read a score written in Bangkok or in in Patagonia. So it is a universal language, and music brought us together. Music made possible that we met and we got married. I mean, so music united us. Otherwise, we wouldn't.
Jefferson, we might never have met.
Probably would have crossed. Maybe in the subway we'll cross each other like
Right.
two ships in the middle of the night. But yes, I mean, my background is different, and my family didn't want me to be a musician, except that it was cute for my sister, for instance, who was older, to play piano and play a little bit of Schumann and not a little bit of Schumann, a little bit of Chopin, but I liked the instrument. I was 3 years younger, and I went to the piano and started, instead of banging like Allison said, I started kind of picking up melodies. And I remember one of the melodies I picked up was in all the black keys, totally pentatonic, a tune called Little Darling. And that's when I did my first experience with modes,
Right.
with modal music. But I showed that I had a lot of interest in music, and my parents got a piano teacher for both my sister and I. And then I went to the conservatory in Buenos Aires. This is all in Buenos Aires. And I started singing, and they thought everything was fine. And it was cute. I could sing in gatherings and parties. And then I started playing a little bit of guitar and more piano and being interested in jazz. And they thought it was very cute. But then when I was 16 years old, I was failing miserably in high school. And I was much more interested in music than anything else. And at that point, they didn't think it was so cute and so it's so nice of me. And they said, well, this is your future. You're going to be, in bars playing totally drunk, maybe drugged, whatever. And no, I mean, my interest was in Stravinsky and Ravel more than, in rock bands or anything like that. I was kind of an outsider because this is the 60s. And I didn't care for the Beatles. But I cared for Hindemith and Bartok, and I didn't listen to the Rolling Stones. I didn't have those albums or Creedence Clearwater Revival, but yes, I did. I had albums of Bill Evans and Miles Davis and John Coltrane and Gil Evans, and I became totally obsessed with music. And sometimes people ask me, but you couldn't do anything else, and I said no, I didn't have any other option. I could only do music. I tried to do something, my parents wanted me to be a lawyer. My father was a doctor, an MD in the Army. And they said, well, this is going to be a total disaster for him. So, but anyway,
isn't it amazing some of the famous composers whose parents wanted them to be something else? You look at Berlioz, or you look at Tchaikovsky, or
right. I mean, and they all started late in a sense. Rimsky-Korsakov was a Navy officer. You come to think Stravinsky got a law degree, even though his father was a famous singer at the, not the Bolshoi, that's the dance,
Right.
At the opera in St. Petersburg. And he did Boris Godunov and things like that. But they wanted him to be a lawyer.
I think musicians know how hard the musician's life can be, even for the best of us. So we always.
First, you have to convince your parents. I mean, that's
Absolutely.
hard.
You were asking us earlier what our daughter does, right? And she is now in graphic design, working her way to be an art director. But she didn't even want to do that for a while because she saw what we went through as musicians. She's like, how am I going to make a living as an artist when my parents are working so hard all the time? And then.
But she studied violin. She
studied trumpet for a while too. She was actually a natural. She actually had a natural buzz, and she would have been really good at it, but she didn't want any of that. But even with graphic design, she kind of shied away from it for a long time because she's like, oh my God, how would I make my career, my life, doing something like that? And guess what? That's exactly what she's doing. So it does relate to various kinds of artistic endeavors. That once it gets you, there really is no turning away from it. it just is what it is. Now, what Carlos didn't say about himself was that he was a child star in Buenos Aires, singing on radio and stuff. He had his own television show when he was in his teens, not under his name. And one of the reasons he learned how to do the kinds of arrangements he does is because they cost so much that he thought, well, I can do this.
Right. I had to pay for my salary. And then I said, well, I wonder how difficult it is to do something like this. And then I picked up a tune that was kind of easy. And I said, well, I'm not going to be writing for, instruments that I don't know, like French horn or woodwinds and things like that. Just strings, piano, bass, drums, and a flute. And the arrangement came out pretty good. And other singers from the show asked me, oh, who wrote that? And I said, I did. So then they started asking me for arrangements. And I found out that it was much more fun to sit and write music and then listen to this, hear this music played by a professional orchestra, then sing over, arrangements.
Were those tango orchestras or what type of orchestras?
No. These were like commercial orchestras where you would sing boleros, some standards, and songs by Elvis Presley or things like that. We're talking about the '60s, but it was pop stuff. So and it was what I really got into, and then I started playing with a rock group, which we did covers. And although it wasn't my type of music, I also had the chance to orchestrate for this group and to write for orchestra. And we were pretty successful doing tunes like Proud Mary and Whiter Shade of Pale and all those tunes. And my interest was really, jazz piano and composition. So in arranging, it's an extension of composition. You got to be, but if you're a composer, you are an arranger. You're modifying music and you are orchestrating it as well. So and it was wonderful, and it's still wonderful. 55 years after.
The joy of creation, right? It just inspires you. And I'm so fascinated by the way that you combine your jazz love with your classical love. What's it like melding those two worlds?
It was the eclectic part of it. I mean, I was interested. I was a rare bird in the sense that although I loved, as I said, Bill Evans and McCoy Tyner and the pianist Herbie Hancock, I also loved Martha Geraghty playing Prokofiev Third, and so much for her incredible technique, but also because it's a wonderful concerto, and Ravel's Concerto in G, and I love that music. I love music. I love tango. I love folk music. I love, good pop music, good rock, obviously jazz. It's much more developed, the sense of jazz, because that's elements of improvisation and form and intricate harmonies, which comes from classical music in a sense, because when you hear somebody like Hancock or Bill Evans, you can hear Debussy and Ravel behind those chords. So,
exactly.
And then, when you hear the harmonies and the orchestration that Gil Evans did for Miles Davis in Porgy and Bess and Sketches of Spain, you also hear Stravinsky, the second tableau of The Rite of Spring, with all those wonderful chords, polychords moving and, in contrary motion. And so all that is related. Mm-hmm. I think that, a lot of jazz musicians will tell you that they love certain musicians, like from Bach, which is the basic of everything, the basis of everything, to Chopin, to then the great orchestral composers of the beginning of the 20th
Bill
century.
Evans practiced Bach constantly, for example, and Rini Rasmus, the jazz pianist, talked about all the classical stuff that she practiced, like all the time.
Isn't it amazing how great artists inspire each other? I mean, I think that's I love the great jazz artists, and I love, of course, classical music, and you realize I'm just fascinated that like pop music and the pop music of its time influenced Bach and Mozart, of course, and Beethoven. They would always have folk music elements in their music as well.
Well, one of the things.
Well, and Beethoven also had a lot of improvisation because of the variations and things like that. But Allison, you should be talking about what you did in Italy a couple of years ago, which is it's a wonderful idea.
Carlos was playing at a blues festival, and so and I was with him there, and then I was going to be going on to teach at a festival in Italy, and Carlos asked them if I could be the warm-up act doing a short lecture on the influence of blues on classical music, which I gave in very rudimentary Italian, which I practiced to the teeth and would make fun of myself when I would make mistakes, because of course I did. But it led me to a couple of recent lectures that I gave where I really expanded it a lot. So it became the influence of jazz and blues on classical music. And one of the things I talked about when I opened was what Carlos said, was Debussy harmonies. And there was a really interesting paper that I had found online that talked about Debussy harmonies and showed some jazz examples, like Bix Beiderbecke and some other people, right? And how those things related. So what I did was I showed the intertwining relationship of how one influenced the other, then one influencing the other back. And so much of this happened in the 19-teens and the 1920s, a very, very fertile ground for so much of this, where in many ways you wouldn't necessarily have separated, oh, this is jazz, oh, this is popular, whereas we do now. But at the time, not so necessarily. We wouldn't have pigeonholed it like that. So go ahead, Carlos.
There are a lot of elements of that, but I mean, one comes to, you think that, okay, well, classical music influenced jazz, a lot of players because of classical music, and vice versa. If it wasn't for George Gershwin and jazz, Ravel's piano concerto would have been different than
That's right.
what it is.
And just you know, when little, you have the, not just that, the blues movement of the violin sonata also would not have been there.
I was just going to, I love that piece. That's just I always play for my university students. We're talking about musical spread and how a style born of the African American tradition translates into a composer from Paris. It just blows my mind how powerful music is, and that you hear that new wave and it can be filtered in so many different ways. It's such an incredible means of communication.
Well, another composer who talked about it a lot was Mio, who of course taught Dave Brubeck.
Right.
And Burt Bacharach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Bacharach. And Burt Bacharach.
And he had a lot to say about it, in fact. And then you look at the trajectory of who influences whom at that point. So, and one of the people he got to school with was a very famous film composer, eventually named Jean Villard, who also wrote some very interesting piano things. But when I gave it more recently, I dug out a lot of women composers too, which I hadn't done the first time. And I thought, no, I really do need to look at what's out there. So you find composers like Dana Suisse, who was called the female Gershwin. And she was very famous in her lifetime, not only for things that she wrote for piano, but film scores and songs and all sorts of other things. And also Elena Katz-Chernin, who was originally from Tashkent, but is very famous in Australia, Victoria Bond. There were a whole lot of composers who were very jazz influenced, and then you start looking at the relationship of, say, the Cakewalk and and then Rag, and you realize that really you can't separate. Right.
Shostakovich.
You can't separate them, and then you have
Shostakovich wrote the jazz suites,
the Bernstein, the riffs, and all this, and how you can't separate them. So you look at someone like Carlos who ranges the gamut. Well, Andre Previn did too. Bernstein did not to the extent that somebody like Carlos did. He did as a composer more than as a pianist, but as a pianist he did too. But, Carlos is a really rare animal that way in terms of, he can just sit at the piano and he's going to start improvising and he's going to just sound like God. And then the next moment he could be in front of a symphony orchestra conducting, you name it. He could be conducting it. And he's just that versatile and frankly, that interesting, I gotta say, as a musician to work with.
I don't know anyone else who's writing film scores at that level and also writing symphonies. I mean, that's really fascinating. I was looking at your output, and it's such an incredible variety of musical styles, genres, from major Hollywood films to great albums of like tango and jazz. And I mean, really, what an incredible variety you have.
I think there are people who do that, who have done that. Andre Previn is one of them, and Bernstein in a sense, except that sometimes you are much more devoted to. I have to say, much more immersed in the world of jazz that I would say in classical music, or academic, or whatever you want to call it, or modern concert music. But I have like 70 pieces, and those are large pieces, including symphonies, 3 symphonies, 2 operas, several concerti for oboe, for 4 for piano, 1 for 2 pianos and symphony orchestra. So I am, in a sense, I love both music. When I say that I am much more immersed in jazz, is because jazz, it gives me an opportunity to sit at a piano and start with some chords, or to play a tune like All the Things You Are, or Jerome Kern, or one of those wonderful standards, and improvise. And it's like theme and variation, I mean, that's the form. And that I can do immediately. The other stuff is, I'm not a pianist of the caliber that Allison is. And sometimes we have played together, and it's difficult. Sometimes, we have done, we got through the Rite of Spring for 2 pianos and things like that.
We have.
But I mean, for me, it's a struggle. For her, she just goes, I mean, I have to learn it. And when we play together, even my music that Allison had transcribed marvelously, I don't have the patience for that. She's the Anna Magdalena here, and she goes and she have done amazing transcription of my music for orchestra to 2 pianos. I have to learn that. So it's a different.
Now, Allison, do you play jazz as well? Or I know you're immersed in the classical.
I don't improvise like Carlos does, but I can to a point, and I do know how to comp. So, like, if I'm in an orchestral situation and somebody gives me only the chords, I do know how to do that, and I've done it a lot. So
she's a very credible jazz player. I mean, we have recorded with orchestras, and with symphony orchestras, a combination of, then again, the third string, the Gunther Schuller, the third string, and to play jazz with the symphony orchestra. And we divided our expertise into playing 6 tunes. I would play 6 tunes, and Allison would conduct 6 of the tunes, and then I would conduct her playing. And what I did is I wrote in the manner of I would say Bill Evans. I mentioned him, and she would play the solo I wrote for her and add things to the solos. And recently she did the same thing with the violas that we worked with Brett Debner, and I wrote some things in comping for Allison in Brazilian rhythms of bossa nova and things like that. And she added things, and very interesting, very tasty. It sounds very credible.
Fantastic.
You can believe it's a Brazilian jazz, Brazilian pianist.
Because I've heard Carlos's voicings and changes that in many ways I automatically do them. Very much like that. So I just did a theater piece with Lori Brown Mirabal, a wonderful soprano. And, she's doing tunes like I Got a Bad and That Ain't Good. And I knew it. I mean, I saw what the changes were in the version she gave me, but I wasn't doing them. I was finding my own kinds of voicings and things and going, boy, Carlos, thank you. That there are certain things I heard him do that I realized I could just automatically find some really interesting and really different kinds of harmonies to use. That made it so much fun.
I love the fact that you guys have grown together and you've learned so much from each other. It's what an incredible journey you two are on.
It was like as I said before, or maybe it got cut, that we met through music.
Well, tell us what you were doing. I'd love to hear about that concert. Must have been some concert.
Allison had a chamber trio. she had a chamber trio, and with a cellist who was a distant cousin of Allison, and curiously born in Argentina. He had played cello. His father was concertmaster
Leo
of the
Greenhouse.
Montreal.
Yeah.
He's a good friend. I've worked with Leo many years.
Leo's, yeah.
And
So Leo's wife and I actually have family in common.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. But this was an odd trio with, instead of violin, piano, cello, piano, it was
saxophone,
alto sax and soprano, saxophone, cello, and piano. And Leo came to the Argentine consulate with his father when I was presenting, this is before I met Allison, when I was presenting an album of a chamber group that I had with Juliet Hafner, the violist, called Orchestra Nova. It was a marvelous group with string quartet and a couple of woodwinds and me and piano. And we would play from Villalobos to Piazzolla to things like that, you know, getting into the semi-classical and folk music of the different countries of Latin America. And Leo was there and he liked the music, and he said to me, you know, my name is Leo Greenhouse. I was born in Argentina, although I lived always in, you know, Canada and now here. And I have a trio. I would like you to write a piece for us. And they commissioned me. So fine, you know, I mean, they commissioned me. Now I wrote, you know, I thought about, you know, writing a piece. Then all of a sudden, tragedy struck. My wife, my first wife, died suddenly. And I had this meeting with them, with Allison and the trio, and I wasn't in a state of mind of canceling that. I wanted to go on and keep writing music, and they came and they commissioned me. They knew about this piece called Serenata, which is a highly contrapuntal piece, and you know, pretty much like a Baroque kind of piece in you know, in C minor. The modulates constantly from C minor to E flat to C minor, you know, going to the relatives until it goes to an A minor and has a solo, which is written. Well, I wrote the piece, and I have to say that the second meeting that I had with Allison brought me a check. It paid me.
Yeah, there's stuff he's not telling you, by the way, about the first meeting, right? So he had the names of the other two people, right? But not mine. I was known as Pianist. And when I met Carlos, I literally forgot my name. It got to be, my name is Allison, hi. And it was because when I shook Carlos's hand, I went, my life just changed. And I had no idea what that meant. I just went, okay, my life just changed. I don't know why. Okay, I guess we'll find out. And he told us at the meeting that his wife had just died. We all stood up and offered to leave. And he said, no, I want you to stay. So he played a whole bunch of music for us, including a movement from a piano concerto. Gave me the piano part and asked me what I thought. And what I said was, any pianist worth his or her salt would kill to play this. What I really want to say is, oh, I want to play it. Oh, I really want to play this. I ended up being the one to play it. But who knew that then?
And she premiered this at the Teatro Colón with the Philharmonic in Argentina, and then recorded the other piece with the Janacek Orchestra, with Dennis Burke conducting. I don't know if you remember Dennis.
Right.
Wonderful conductor. And recorded and played it in here in Queens, and played it in Australia.
Right. Now, Carlos lived in Battery Park City at that time, and I lived on the Upper West Side because I'd moved back from London the year before and joined this group. And when we left, Cynthia said to me, you know, he's perfect for you. I almost got hit by a bus right after that moment. Luckily, I didn't. And Leo was going to be going to Canada to work with his parents on some stuff, and they decided I would become the business contact with Carlos for the group. So this is what I truly was for a period of a few months, that we were in touch for business. We did discover we knew people in common, and you know, when the first World Trade Center attack happened, and I called Carlos at the time, and I said, "Do you need anything?" just let me know. And I figured he had to have lots of friends. Why would he wouldn't necessarily notice me? Well, history changed all that, obviously, because yes, we are married almost 28 years. We know each other 29 years in October. And yes, so my life did change when I shook his hand and said, "Hi, my name is
It's meant to be. Sometimes it's just meant to be, and fate takes over. And what an incredible journey.
It really has been.
Yes,
It really has been that.
I just saw Leo last week. I've worked with him quite a bit. Our kids went to preschool together, believe it or not. And we met when I was music director of that church. And then I asked him to play, and he came in. And we've been working together for a good 10, 15 years. Really
He's
fantastic.
a wonderful guy, wonderful
challenge. Really sweet. And Lily, she's a talented girl. I gave her some lessons at one time. When she was going to play with Berta, when she was going to do the Carnival of the Animals, Leo said, "Would you help her?" And it's like, yeah, sure. And she was very good. I know it's not what she does, but she was very good at the time. She was a very musical girl, and I know she had started doing jazz singing and stuff at one time, and she was good. Our
kids are all the same age. They're all in college now. It's just it's incredible how life goes on. And I love the intersections of musicality, right? That's what makes making music such an incredible thing, is the connections you make with the colleagues and friends over the years. And look at yourselves, it's just incredible.
Absolutely. And I will say that I admire Carlos more than any other musician I know. And I say that as a professional. I don't just merely say that because I'm married to him and I have to, because I don't have to. I really don't. I really mean what I say about that I really can count on maybe a couple fingers. Somebody who is complete a musician as he is, because not only can he turn around and tell you all sorts of historical recordings, Bill Evans or whomever, but he could talk to you about any Shostakovich symphony. He could talk to you about any Stravinsky piece, because he knows them. We have a composer friend, Charles Fussell. Wonderful.
I studied with Charles when I did my doctorate at Rutgers. What an amazing teacher, too.
Yes, he was.
Great guy.
And I did an independent study with him my final year of my doctorate, where we went through score after score after score after score. And I would have to come in and I'd have to be able to talk to him about all these things, knowing that anything I had to say, he already knew.
Pretty brilliant guy. Absolutely brilliant man.
Brilliant. He and Carlos ended up becoming very good friends. And they could converse about all sorts of scores and things that I found myself not necessarily knowing, and then going and studying as a result of listening to them talk about them. In fact, Carlos was the one who introduced me to the music of Carl Amadeus Hartmann. And his sonata, which is epic, was one of the pieces on my Grammy-nominated CD, 20th Century Piano Sonatas. And I didn't know about Hartmann particularly. Carlos did. He knew his symphonies. And he said, "Go see if he has some piano music." And so I started listening to symphonies, which aren't done here really because they're fabulous, but they require rehearsal time that we don't pay for here. Sorry, American orchestras, we just don't do that. But
I was going to tell you, you have such incredible repertoire depth. You do some really interesting. Let's ask how you found the repertoire you perform, because it's often such interesting composers and little-known composers that have so much to say, and you really delve into great repertoire and much depth.
Thank you. Some of it, the Hartmann.
And also, I have to say that Allison also approaches, besides this, the 20th Century Sonatas that has a wonderful version of the Berg Sonata, the Hindemith Second Sonata, 3 or 4 cabaret songs by not cabaret songs, by Schoenberg.
That were very early and very tonal.
The first, those are the early ones, right?
Right.
1896.
And and it doesn't sound much before the 12-tone era. And this Hartmann sonata that has 2 different endings, 2 optional endings. But then Allison would approach things like doing a transcription of Daphne Cicloy, the second suite for piano, Mabel Roy, the complete ballet, So, and she does these things. She jumps from the Scriabin last 5 preludes, which is a wonderful piece of music, to do South American landscapes and do Ginastera, Piazzolla, and what is the Brazilian composer? Wonderful. So I mean, she can cover a lot of repertoire, and as I said, she also does this crossover into blues and jazz elements that had influence.
It's so great to be able to explore so much music. There's so much. As a conductor, the more music I do, the more I realize, man, I wish I could do more, and I want to study more, and always bring new composers to the table.
I know.
Oh yeah, but
Isn't that amazing?
So I'm going to answer the question that you posed, which is, well, the Hartman was because Carlos said, see what he has for piano, and then I found the sonata, which is one of the hardest things I ever played. The Weinberg, the complete piano music. Now that was, I fell into that. That was just one of those happy accidents that happened. I had done the clarinet sonata with Alex Fitterstein years ago when we both taught at Kane. And I thought, oh, this music is too good. I have to find out some more about this composer. And through the internet, thank you, internet, one thing led me to another thing, which led me to another thing and another person and another source. And so I originally had recorded the published 6 sonatas and then 2 short pieces that hadn't been published. And then Pure Music knew I was doing this, and they had come into the archive of PDFs of all of this unpublished music, and they offered it to me first. So I said, okay, I'm game. I got in touch with Naxos and I said, are you willing to suspend my deadline? Because if you are, I just came into all this music. I'm going to have to learn it. And so I learned it and then recorded it. Ended up working with David, oh my goodness, I've just forgotten his last name. Oh, that's funny. I'll think of it soon enough. David Fanning. David Fanning is one of the experts, not only on Weinberg, but Shostakovich and et cetera. And he and his wife have done extensive biographical research into Weinberg. Anyway, he ended up writing my liner notes. And then I ended up getting in touch with Tommy Pearson. Now, Tommy Pearson was one of the people who put Weinberg on the map. He knew Weinberg when Weinberg was still alive. Weinberg died in 1996. And he had actually funded the 6 sonatas when Murray McLaughlin had recorded them. An extraordinary recording by Murray. It just is. Mine is very different, my point of view. And so I got to know Tommy, who gave me a lot of extra insight into Weinberg and was able to send me some further information so that ended up becoming the basis of what my doctorate was at Rutgers, which was the unpublished music, some chapters of which have been published. So, but that was just how I happened to find somebody through the internet, find someone else through the internet and the internet. And most of these people I haven't met physically. It's all been online. So
that leads us seamlessly into 2021, 2020, in the COVID era when we've all been distanced, socially distanced, and we've been forced distance, and we were on lockdown. I mean, so that is.
Yeah, but even before COVID, Justin, I mean,
Jason.
I have worked with people I've never seen their face.
I'll answer any Jason.
I'm sorry. I have worked. No, I have worked with people I've never seen their faces, and who have commissioned me music. I've written it or arrangements and send them by PDF, and they thank me and send me the check or whatever, a PayPal payment. And then I found out that they played or they recorded. It's a little bit of one of the advantages, not a lot of advantages on internet, but one of them is what we're doing now. And the other one is that we're able to do a lot of our work without meeting with people and doing it working with Prague or Australia or whatever. When we were recording with the Prague City of Prague Philharmonic, we did several recordings in the last 15 years. I would work the compositions or the arrangements and send them by PDF. And then we would fly there. By the time we got to the studio, all the music was there. We didn't have to carry anything, or it was there. A librarian would put it in place and make sure that everything was legible, and that is a wonderful thing.
Thankfully, that the COVID happened now, and we have the telecommunication. Now, telecommunications is getting even better now because it's had to. Everyone's like scrambling to, be able to do live rehearsals with Zoom, and that's not been really that feasible. I mean, a couple people have experimented with it, but it's an emerging technology. But thankfully, we've had that, and we've been able to employ that and to keep our collaborations alive and work with our colleagues. How have
well, that's interesting you bring that up, because sure. I am going to tell you something that when the pandemic started and things started to shut down, I called my best friend, who's a tech person based in California, and I said, this is not going to be 2 weeks. This is going to be a long-term thing. And so one of the things that he got together with his tech people and with how you could have orchestras in the same building, but different locations in the building, and how you can have them play simultaneously. So a conductor who'd be yet in another location would have direct visual with an entire orchestra. How do you deal with the streaming? How do you deal with the sound quality? How do you deal with the visual? Then how do you market? And then how do you market it? And what kind of channel do you have, including e-commerce, social interaction, all that. And one of the organizations we've been sitting in and observing was the Orchestra of the Americas, with how they were doing everything online from these different countries. We're actually talking with them later this week about next steps and the possibility of us maybe working with them on certain things, because we believe, and I really do believe this, that hybrid's here to stay. It's not leaving. And that this COVID has changed things forever, not temporarily. And we need to
even at the community level, I've been streaming every single. I've been doing choral rehearsals all summer. I stream every one now, because if anyone's even the hint of has a cold, stay home, watch it on the video, rehearse that way. Come back when you're healthy. I mean, that's not gonna go away, certainly for chorals, orchestras. We don't want people who are sick there right now. We want to, protect ourselves as much as possible, but still give people a way to engage with their communities. And this is going to be something that never goes away. I think you're right.
And the way that, go ahead.
It is sad. No. I said it's sad because it's only opening doors to more of these things, or this variations, variants, and whatever. Like we have the lambda, the deltas. We're running out of letters.
Greek alphabet has to expand a bit.
Exactly. I mean, we're gonna go for the Hebrew alphabet. The Aleph
and then after that, we're gonna go Latin.
With the conga drum, Latin. I just feel that this is the beginning of. We have done too much harm to the planet, and this is the beginning of one pandemic, and another one will come. And it's sad to say, but it's a good thing that we learn to live this way, because I foresee something like this for the near future. That this is not going to go away. It's not only COVID-19. It's going to be something new. I'm not Nostradamus, but I mean, the way we go, and the denials of people saying I'm healthy, I'm never going to get sick, and then they die and whatever. I mean, I'm saying that we're not prepared. We better be prepared for the next one.
We've all learned that. We've all seen all of our work get canceled for an entire year and a half, and that's the least of our worries.
Right.
We're worried about health, music is secondary.
And people we know who died. I mean, we've all seen that. But I think there's also more to it, that when I say it's hybrid, which is this, that first of all, the advantage to technology is that you do have the opportunity to reach a much wider audience, potentially, than you would in your locality. And that's really important. And also bridging the generation gap. At that aspect of things, that we have those opportunities, which in some ways, this is a really good thing that we're looking at, that, and the fact that people do have large screen TVs, people have good sound systems, people did get used to being able to stream something, have great visual, have really great sound. No, is it the same as being surrounded by live sound? No, it is not, for sure. But you also have the comfort of not having to commute anywhere. Nobody knows how you look when you're at home. You could be sitting with your glass of wine or whatever your fancy. You could be in your PJs, and you could be experiencing great music making at a really good price.
That is true. The economic thing is a reality. I mean, so we've priced classical music out of a lot of people's reach. It's currently so expensive in the States. Whenever I conduct in Eastern Europe, it's basically like 50 cents a ticket to go see an opera or a symphony. But here, it's so expensive.
Hello. Yeah.
I know, and it's the whole thing. But if you come to think, the radio started with this back in the 20s and 30s, when people would have that big radio and listen to a concert or an opera from Carnegie Hall or wherever they were playing it, and that started with the fact that it was available, and it was approachable for a lot of people who didn't have, let alone the 50 cent, $5 or whatever, to go and to get dressed and go to the opera. But they would turn the radio and listen to Lily Pons or Caruso or and La Boheme and Verdi and which is marvelous.
Right.
And in a way, that was later on TV and later on DVDs and now it's internet.
YouTube all the way.
YouTube, Medici TV, and some of these others. I mean, there's a lot to be said for it. And so I am grateful for the fact that we can be so streamed in the sense of how many people could possibly have the experience that they wouldn't otherwise. And you're right, ticket prices here, especially in the New York area, are so expensive, and they're not coming down even post-COVID. In many cases, organizations can't afford to have them necessarily come down. So from that point of view, I think twice sometimes. There are things I'd love to go see, and then I look at my ticket prices and what's going to cost me to go to New York, park my car, or if I'm taking a train, I have to hope that I can get a train back and all the rest of it. And so from that point of view, there are things I get priced out of, and I really regret that fact. So what am I going to choose to do? I'll go to the movie theater to go see the Met, for example, where you hear it so great. And you have this huge screen and look at what you're able to see. So I understand. And I actually think that
we lost Allison's sound there for a second. We'll get her back.
Yeah.
I
hear
Carlos.
Me or
crystal clear. As we get Allison's sound back, why don't you fill in? Carlos, what's something you learned about yourself during this COVID period?
Yes. Well, I had the series of, besides having COVID, that I managed that in a couple of days. Then a couple of months after that, I was writing a piece for 3 pianos that supposedly is going to be recorded at the end of this year in London. But I don't know whether that's going to happen because of this variant. And then I started developing difficulties. This happened right after my birthday, of walking and expressing myself and of equilibrium. And as a result, my doctor suggested that I go to the hospital, and I went to the hospital. I got a CAT scan, and they discovered that I had subdural hematomas and bleeding. Yeah, and I was operated the next day. It released in a couple of days. I came back home. I felt better. And I went for, the doctor took my stitches out. And then I started feeling worse than that. And I sat at the piano. I couldn't play. I couldn't relate to keys. If I wanted to play an F minor chord, I would play a G minor chord. I mean, I had a problem with distance. And my right hand, 3 of the fingers didn't work. And my signature, I couldn't recognize it. Anyway, I went back to the hospital. They did more tests, more CAT scans, and they discovered this time severe bleeding. And as a result of that, I had 2 more brain surgeries. And the surgeon said, this time the surgery, by the way, was a craniotomy and a drain, and it was very, very complicated. The surgeon said, this is COVID related because I didn't have any falls or anything like that, any accidents. And they said, this is a spontaneous bleeding of the dura, and it was pushing my brain down. I had to go into rehab for about 3 months and basically relearn to walk.
Wow.
And I was a day away from just going to the other side.
You learned to drive again, all sorts of stuff like that.
I had to learn to drive, and about 2 months ago, but in May, I did a recording because I wanted to feel how was it, like to go. I could play alone and things, and I had a good tempo, a good sense of rhythm and things like that, and coordination and harmonic coordination.
How long did it take to get the fingers back and to get your music back?
It was quick. The fingers were not an issue. Amazing. After I had the surgery. I was able to get back into doing some scales and things like that, and then and basically get into playing pieces of music. But what I did was a response to the COVID pandemic and doing music that was in vogue in the 40s during the Second World War, tunes of distancing and tunes of like Memories of You, I'll Be Seeing You. All the tunes that were, like when the wives were, being, the GIs would go to Europe to an uncertain destiny and future, and they would be playing these tunes and alone together and in the wee small hours of the morning, and I recorded that, and I felt very good. I felt that I wasn't.
He was terrific. Anything. He's understating it. So.
Well. I work. I'm a hard worker. I like to work. I enjoy working. Not as Allison on the piano. Allison sits at the piano 6 hours. I sit 2 hours. When I'm writing, I can write for 10 hours, and I don't hear anything. I don't eat. I just don't. I keep writing. But playing piano is a different.
It's true.
Huh?
So so
it is true. I mean, but playing piano, you have the endurance and the stamina to do that. I don't.
Yeah, but it's my full-time thing. I mean, you are also composing and doing other things too besides playing. So it's I don't sit and compose 10 hours a day. So it's.
No, you play piano.
Right, or I'm teaching or whatever. Yeah.
And that's why we don't compete at all.
You guys make some team, I'll tell you. So, Carlos, what did you learn? What was it like getting back and doing that recording and being there in the recording process and working with colleagues again after such an incredible journey and such a scary time? And
it is a scary time. I tell you, Allison asked me, and I was never afraid for my sense of I contemplated death. I don't want to be dramatic, but I did, and I said, "Well, this is it." I was afraid of not being able to play again. That was my biggest fear. That was my biggest fear.
Or compose.
Because I said, if I survive and I or write music or make sense of harmonic movement of leading tones, contrary motion. The chromaticism, all the things that we work, and that we work away from our instruments, away from the baton, away from the orchestra, away from the score. When we are in bed and we're about to sleep or not, and we can't sleep, we're thinking about music and we're resolving things. That is what I couldn't do either. When I was, because. I have to say this is graphic, but I mean, one of the doctors who came to my room said, "NG, when we drain the blood, I saw the brain regaining the shape and regaining position because it was pushed, and I had the danger was that the brain could have been herniated, and that was it. That would have been the end of it. But as I said, my biggest fear is that, would I be able to play
I couldn't be there for any of this, don't forget, because this was COVID time.
Oh.
So our communication was all through FaceTime. Plus, I was keeping in, his surgeon was really good about being in touch with me constantly. Plus, I played his music at his craniotomy.
Wow.
Yes, on the second surgery they did. And you know, one thing that also I learned there, which is very important, I was 10 days in the hospital, 3 days on the first visit and 7 days on the second one. And I was most of the time in the ICU. And it was June. And I asked the nurses, I said, well, but this is empty. I don't see anybody here. What happened with, you must have had a lot of COVID patients. And they say, yes, certainly we did. And they were here, and they say yes, and sharing the ICU sometimes too, and sharing the ventilators and things like that. Because so what happened to them? And this was a sobering blow that I had. They said they all die. They all die, and then all of a sudden I saw the magnitude of this. I said, nobody, not from here. Nobody walked, and we remember them. We remember all of them. We remember their families. We remember holding a phone for them to have a last FaceTime conversation, or
at least a viewing.
Their relatives.
Those medical professionals really are the heroes in this one. I mean,
they are, and this would bring in something that I didn't know. That you said, well, you go to how you get better. You walk out and smiling on a wheelchair, and then you go, to dance, and it's not the case. That's not the case.
No,
unfortunately,
but it wasn't for Carlos either.
Don't understand.
So, when he was in the process of it, I, on my end, was coordinating what happened after he would come out. So I was talking to social workers and various doctors and various nurses and saying, okay, so do I have to refit the house? Is he going to need stuff in the bathrooms? Is he going to need stuff, in the bedrooms? And I had very little time to suss this out with anyone. Does he have to go to a rehab facility? What were all the things that we were going to have to deal with, depending on what status he was in when it was time for release? So these were all the questions I was asking, and not to anyone's face. This was all over the phone. So luckily, I didn't have to refit the house. Yes, he did go through all the therapy and all that, but I didn't have to do that. So, and his physical therapist, who we've known for a long time, knew how to deal with patients like Carlos, knew exactly what he was dealing with, could talk him through, here's what to expect, here's how this is going to go, here's what we're working on, and knew what Carlos did for a living. So he could say, okay, and I can deal with the fact that you have these skills, here's what we're building. And Carlos was, of course, super at doing everything he needed to do to make the recovery he made. So, I mean, you wouldn't know if you didn't know.
3 times a week. But the first month I couldn't.
So I had to take him everywhere.
So
which was fun.
I basically had to train myself again because I was leaning to.
Yeah, it was
to the
weird.
right.
But he learned, and he's fine. But yeah, seriously. So for anyone who may be listening to this at some point, Carlos is fully capable of doing anything and everything he wants to do. So, so the record that he was talking about, he recorded with Dave Fink on bass and Billy Drummond on drums, and it'll be released on Sunnyside Records in January. And then shortly after,
a testament to recovery and renewal and possibilities of the human triumph. That's an incredible story, and I can't wait to hear the music.
And love. Yeah, well, we'll send it to you. Love for music is basically, and the healing powers of music. It's amazing, the healing power. And as I said, that Allison said, the doctor was so sympathetic that he played my music during the
Turns out that he's a polo guy, and he and his partners have polo ponies in Argentina.
Oh, no way.
It just became quite a topic of conversation with him, too. It was really interesting. The other recording that we just recently did, a whole bunch of arrangements that Carlos did for a project called Anything Goes, which is the title track. And that was for Brett Dubner, viola, and me. with our friend Jimmy Musto on drums and Roger Wagner on bass. And then
Jimmy's been on the show, a great friend and wonderful artist as well. Shout out to Jimmy and to Brett.
He's a fantastic cellist.
Right. And then the string quartet members of New Jersey Symphony, like Sasha Nelia and Min Yang, and then Julie Goodale on viola and Elliot Balin on cello, playing some of the pieces with us too. And Carlos was conducting. So, and everyone, just about everyone there had known what he'd been through too. And so it was just a great, first of all, reunion that we could all be together recording in the same space, that we were able even to do that, let alone that everyone knew what Carlos had been through. So the fact that he's there conducting, everything's great, everything sounded amazing, the arrangements were just gorgeous. So so we had that too.
It's my manager.
In many ways, that's a wonderful thing. So, Allison, what is something you learned going through all this incredible adversity? What's something you learned about yourself?
I'm strong as hell. I only panicked once through the whole thing. And of all the stupid things that I panicked about, the day he was going to come home from the hospital the second time after the 2 procedures, and I was trying to recaulk the toilet, and I just couldn't do it. Our daughter was home with us at this point. She was still living in Los Angeles, but she'd flown in. She's like, Mom, just let me do it. And I sat on the stairs and I boo-hooed a bit. And I said, it's not about the caulk. It's just the stress. But most of it, I just handled each thing exactly as it came because I didn't have a choice. So I just realized each challenge that would come up, okay, I would just take a lot of notes, ask a lot of questions to say, okay, so if this happens, what do we do? If this happens, what do we do? What do you, and just handle it as it came. And that's really how I saw it, and to be as strong as I could be for Carlos, knowing I couldn't be there to hold his hand. So it was all.
No, but Allison would call, and I have to say, sometimes in the morning, especially after surgery that I was fasting for surgery, I wouldn't have my breakfast in time, and I was like famming. And
I would get right on it.
And said,
I'd get right on it and just call the nurses.
No, but I'm waiting for my breakfast and whatever. Oh, don't worry about that. And then she would call and said, this is Dr. Franzetti.
I would. I would pull the doctor card.
And you certainly are.
You can use the title.
You're right.
My husband didn't have
he has to eat. Where is it? And when are you going to get it there? Oh, they would too. Yeah. There have been a couple of times in my life when I've pulled the doctor card. There was one time when our daughter was in Shanghai doing an internship when she was in college, and she got sick. She got mono, and she was in an American hospital there, and her doctor treating her was American. And at that point, through WeChat, I was able to be in touch, and I pulled the doctor card a few times on them. Now, her college that she went to knew that it was a DMA doctor, and I was not a medical doctor, but they didn't know this in China. So evidently, if you say doctor, it's like, so I was like, this is Dr. Franzetti. What are you doing about this and this and this for my daughter? And they'd answer, and I'm like, okay, fine, when's her follow-up visit? When are you clearing her to fly? When are you going to do this and this and this? And I'm like making it up as I go along. But yeah. Yes. So yes, my doctor card. Yes. Whereas Carlos' kids, though, if we're on a plane and someone says, "Is there a doctor on the plane?" Please be quiet.
Don't answer. Be quiet.
They'll ask you to do a concerto or to write you a piece of music.
Yeah, that's really fine. I could take your pulse.
You need immediate transposition.
I actually would be able to do a Heimlich. That I could do. Basic CPR, I actually do. That I could do, because those are basic skills that we should all know how to do. Those, if it really came to it, I would just do that. but no, I mean, in general, no, I would not be the person to call for a life emergency.
You guys are a dynamic team. I'm so glad to get to meet you both together. I've met you, certainly Allison alone, but it's so nice to meet you both. What are you both working on now, and what are you working on together?
Well, we have this coming recording, the piece that I wrote, which is called Minotaur in the Labyrinth, and it's a seven movement piece talking about, from Odysseus to well, I forgot all the names now, but and it's for 3 pianos, and it involves Erica Nikraus on one piano from the Eroica Trio, Polly Furman, and Allison. And
3 pianos. That's an unusual voice. I love that.
Yeah.
3 pianos. 3 pianos. And there are 4 other composers who also contributed to writing also short pieces. This is a 27 minute
something like that, yeah.
28 minute long piece. And the producer, Ted Viviani, who had produced my piano, the concerto for 2 pianos and orchestra, which was recorded.
And that was for Erica and Polly.
Right. This time he booked Abbey Road Studio in London to record at the end of the year. And logistically, this is a nightmare because they need 3 pianos. Abbey Road has a piano, and it's a good concert piano, but they need the other pianos. That we all kind of agree on having one brand or one size. Not to have a 9-foot next to a 7-foot, like to have 3 concert 9 foots, or if we can Fussell, it's better. But then the rehearsal place, and then all the quarantine laws of England that up to recently you have to be 10 days in a hotel, then the swabs.
And there's still all sorts of tests you still have to take.
Yes, and they didn't admit people with anything but the AstraZeneca vaccine.
It was crazy. It was crazy.
So I mean, which is crazy. I mean, catch-22.
But also, Erica lives in New Jersey like we do, but Polly lives in Valencia in Spain, and then Jovino Santos Neto, the other pianist, he's the pianist with the 2 of them for the other suite. I'm not involved with that. He's in Seattle, and the composers. In San Francisco.
In San Francisco.
And then the other composers.
It's a logistical nightmare.
Right. And the other composers are in different places.
And at this time to fly.
It's just crazy. So, yeah. So we're working on, I mean, he's got the logistics set for when we're in London, where we're going to rehearse, where we're going to stay, who's recording which day, et cetera. He's got that. So hopefully.
We're just hoping that we can do it with mask or no mask, right?
Yeah, we're just hoping that Delta doesn't wipe it out.
We're all in that boat. I've got multiple concerts. Something in Sicily just came up, and I got to ask. I'm like, boy, I'm hoping that we can actually have some of these shows this year. Boy, you can imagine.
What were you doing?
I just got asked to do a Don Giovanni in Sicily in the spring, but we're all kind of looking around, saying, "Oh boy, I hope that doesn't derail everything." But a lot of concerts are happening. I'm chorus mastering and assistant conducting a big opera in Phoenicia, New York. In the next 2 weeks. I've been working all summer and doing concerts, pops concerts.
Right down in Ocean Grove, yeah.
So we're starting. Things are happening, but it's it's like shifting sand.
Right,
We have to be very careful with travel plans and. Do we wear a mask? Do we not wear a mask? I mean, I'll wear anything. I'll wear a hazmat suit. I'll wear a bubble. Whatever. Yeah. If I get to make music, I'm fine.
Right.
No, of course. I mean, I would rather wear a mask. When I go out, I do it. I mean, I go to a store. I mean, out of respect.
Actually, so do I. And in fact, I just got some more N95s. So we have them as well.
Not a bad idea. I think all schools are going to wear them in the fall. New Jersey just announced it, so that's coming.
Yeah, exactly.
We know about numbers like N5 and N95. It's amazing. So what are your plans?
Well, I'm a university professor. Is to get back in my classroom. I think all of us teachers are going to get back to academia or public schools, and we're not going to know our ensembles because we were all remote when they weren't actually physically in front of us a lot of the year. So for me, it's going to be rebuilding for all my organizations. Rebuilding. I do a lot of different things, and I love thriving on a lot of different. Like I do opera, I do symphony, I do choral.
Right.
I love doing a lot of different types of music, working with a lot of different people. I added up. up the COVID year. My son and I did 100 virtual projects for Seton Hall, Ocean Grove, choral societies. But we turned that page, and like hopefully we don't have to do that again. But we're ready if we need to. We learned how to do it from scratch, and now we can. But I can't wait to actually build my ensembles. The first chord I heard when I came down to Ocean Grove, when I tuned a C major chord, it was like so emotional to hear humans singing together again, not through a Zoom screen.
Yeah, you mean just a triad, or
it was a triad, but it didn't matter. I had root position. I'm like, I tuned the third high, and I heard them singing. I'm like, oh. One thing, they sang the whole time via the Zoom screen, but I couldn't hear them. But the second they can tune to each other. It took everyone a while. They used to listening this way, which is so important. They were all singing, but they weren't listening.
Because that's dialogue, and that's the important thing about music, that you can communicate with music, and it's amazing. It's what Allison was telling you that I felt when I had the string quartet there, and the viola, and Jimmy, and Allison, and everybody playing together.
There's nothing like it. It's so emotional, and you remember why you do all the sacrifice. You remember why, it's why we do it.
Exactly.
When you sacrifice yourself.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. It's. I had that experience yesterday. What I was telling you pre-show is that I was just part of a conducting institute called Bellissima. This was its pilot year for young teenage girls between the ages of about 13 and 18. All talented instrumentalists who'd never conducted in their lives. And they all conducted the Montclair Orchestra yesterday at SOPAC. They all did a beautiful job. And some of the girls were also soloists, playing as well as conducting. And so I played harpsichord on some of it. And so I sat backstage so I could actually watch the girls' faces and everything as they were conducting. I have to tell you, I started to cry watching some of it, because
Stars of Tomorrow.
Oh my God, what they were able to accomplish was amazing. In the Montclair Orchestra, it was a smaller size, chamber size orchestra. They played so well, and everybody was so attuned to these girls and the experience that they were having. And I can honestly say all of us grew through the experience as it went on. So I was one of their rehearsal pianists, and the teachers were very good about letting me actually have my say a lot of time with the girls, because they realized I had conducted on a podium. I've been an orchestral pianist. I've been a concerto soloist. I played chamber music. I've done this my whole life. And so there's a lot of and I'm used to teaching. So they were very good about, if I had an idea, they just let me run with it.
That's so cool. As a young conductor, there's no better people to ask than the orchestra who's up down there. And sometimes you don't get that experience. I learned from an early age to get to be friendly with a lot of my players, and then to really see what I'm doing and really refine my technique.
Right.
That's the better thing to do. I mean,
because sometimes what I could do is literally show them what they were showing me, and say, okay, here's what I actually need to see. Here's what I don't actually need to see, and here's why.
It's very practical. A lot of the time, it's very practical.
Right. And then what we talked to them about was, as you learn some of the technique, what's really going to happen is your musical instinct is going to take over, and you're going to just know, because of what you feel, how to move. So I taught a lesson yesterday to one of my piano students who was working on one of the seasons, Tchaikovsky, June. And I was having her work out what she wants just the left hand to do. And I said, conduct with your right hand and see what you get. She also plays flute. So she's in the New Jersey Youth Symphonies and stuff, so she knows that experience. And I said, try that to see if you get the support from your left hand that you really want to get by conducting it with your right. And she tried it. She found it really interesting. And I hadn't thought of that before. So it was very interesting. Then the other thing we did, because we were doing it online yesterday, and I said, when you practice scales, it depends on what your musical intent is. Are you looking for a more legato sound? Are you looking for a more articulate sound, like maybe a Mozart or something? I said, you want to know how to practice both. And so what I did was conductor using different upbeats. Was I looking for the more active one, or was I looking for the more lyrical one? Now, granted, we had a bit of time lag, but it didn't matter. And she found it really interesting, and so did I, to see what was her response. And I said, you want to think this? I said, you could do a video of yourself cueing yourself in because you're used to already watching a conductor and you know how to respond. And that may inform what you're doing on the piano in a really different way that you hadn't thought of before. And frankly, I had neither quite the same way. So I found myself trying different things teaching because of this institute I had just been part of.
It's amazing how whenever I teach or whenever I do a clinic or something like that, I always walk away saying, reevaluating everything I do. And I find that to be incredibly rewarding and always gets you thinking again. It's like, are my upbeats right? Am I giving a good, because I can hear with an orchestra, I can usually hear with a professional orchestra, the quality of the upbeat is incumbent. If you don't breathe with them, you can hear it in the brass especially. But it's just great to work with kids.
Because by teaching, you're explaining what you already know, but you are doing it, you take for granted, you go but by teaching that, and teaching subdivisions and things like that, you kind of analyze what you already know, but you're explaining.
Carlos, do you do any teaching with composition?
What you're doing. I've done privately. I've done it in seminars at the Manhattan School. I've done it at, in Caracas, in Venezuela, and in Argentina. Basically seminars, it's hard to follow a protocol, which is the normal protocol. But what I do is I do seminars on orchestration and compositions and jazz composition. That's great, because
you have so much to spread. You have so much to share with people that, can really be, so everyone can learn from that. It's such a wonderful thing. I'm glad that.
Yeah, I take it. I take each case individually because what I'm teaching basically is for already formed musicians. You don't have to go for chorales, only major first.
Learn to write a fugue,
and then you can go to minor. Right. Yes, right. But I go for as I said, well taught musicians who wants to span into different things, and sometimes classical musicians who wants to get into jazz. Or jazz musicians who said, how can you develop beyond 32 bars? How can you do a 1,000 bar symphony? And, and then you start talking about the Rondeau form, the Sonata Allegro form, the variation form, and things like that. And what you said is very interesting, but by teaching, you learn some more about what you're telling them. And say, well, this is the way, and then you modulate here. And then, not going as strict as the Hindemith, the Hindemith, 37 bars, and then you go and modulate, and then, no.
At the end of the fugue, put a pedal that signifies the end, and then cadence. And
right. And then go to the stretto.
Exactly.
I try to be freer than that, but I believe that each potential student, has its own voice. And you can teach up to a point. And beyond that, you have to let them learn and find out their own solutions. And if they are within the parameters, we have to remember that all the analysis of great pieces came after the piece was.
Sometimes the farther it goes, the more perspective we have on those pieces. Right?
Exactly.
Right. And they were composed by breaking rules, like Scriabin was breaking
Beethoven,
the
Symphony
tritone
number
rules
5, Symphony number 7, Symphony number 9. Yep.
Exactly.
Bach doing a melodic minor scale the way we teach you're not supposed to. I mean, seriously. It never ceases to amaze me. Well, I talk about in teaching what the how is for. So what do you learn technique for? What is that for? And sometimes it becomes the chicken and the egg. And sometimes we are able to find our answers because emotionally we connect and we automatically do something. Sometimes we know what we want to do, but we don't know how physically to manifest it. And that's what the how is for. And so
singers, boy, technique is for when a singer, like when you're not feeling very good, you need that technique to lean on, to have that rock solid foundation for you're not 100%. It's like, that's the backbone. It kind of informs your choices. And then you can break the rules once the rules are established.
Absolutely. You have to know what you're doing. You have to know how to write in order to be a novelist. You have to understand verbs and things and all.
A chef has to use knives and knows how to balance the spices.
Exactly. But after that,
there was a really interesting article in the New York Times a couple of months ago that talked about physical learning, and as opposed to what your brain does. And that's so much of what we do as musicians. It's the, if you're a pianist, of course, the tactile sense of what you have to know how to do and why, and the importance of the physical experience of learning. And it wasn't talking specifically about music, but I found myself
sending it applies.
I sent it out to my various students to read it. A couple did. I wish more had. But one of the things I will say to them is, when you're learning music and you're a pianist, it is not just that it is linear this way, it's also vertical. But we have to learn how to take the vertical and make it horizontal. So how do you relate thing A to thing B to thing C? What actually moves and how do you get there? And if you think that you're just going to try to do it by what it sounded like, you are never going to get it. And which I've discovered, much to my chagrin, that many younger students are like, well, if I've heard it, then I must be able to imitate it again and again. And they can't. And they wonder why not. And I say, well, this is why you have to learn fingering and certain physical patterns and know what it actually feels like in your hand. And Carlos gave me a 5-finger exercise, literally just going up and down, and here and here and here. That you do very slowly. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
And that when he told me to do it, I thought, this is crazy. What am I going to do this for? Right? Until I did it. And
why don't you demonstrate for us? We got a piano right there behind you.
It's super duper ridiculous. You go super slow. And then you do it again. Right? And then you go up a half step. And you keep going. And you can do it major, you can do it minor, you can also then do patterns. Now, it seemed, I thought at first, oh, come on. Yeah, I was working on a Rachmaninoff lecture recital that I was giving, that Brett was part of. And we're doing Rachmaninoff Sonata, and I did a transcription of the second movement of Rach 2 for viola and piano, which works really well. And then we did our Suisse singing and the vocals, right? And talking about this stuff. And so I was doing this in a couple of days, and Carlos was like, trust me, just do this warm up every day, do it for 3 days, and you are going to feel better. And I thought, oh, really? I'm teaching piano all the time. You're asking me to do this? And then I did it. And he was right. So what I found...
You know what it is?
It's really what it is. And it's not canon. It's not canon, though. It's not mechanical like.
No, it's not charity.
It's not mechanical like that. So you find your balance point. You find sound. It's relaxation. It's how you put your hands, how you shift. All these things in this simple group of exercises, and I discovered not one of my students could get through it. Huh. And I discovered that some professionals I told to do it couldn't get through it either. And it was because you really have to listen and think differently for it to truly work, as silly as that seems. And so now, are my students able to do it now? Yeah. And they're like, yeah, we really understand why your husband suggested this. And then I said, you go from that rather than start super fast scales when your hands are not ready for it. And that was the thing.
You know what it is?
Please.
Also, sorry to interrupt. It's a little bit of the exercises before jogging, elongation and things like that.
You stretch.
But I think exactly calisthenics. You stretch, and this is yoga for pianists. I mean, I think I got, and plus the permutations that you come up with.
You have to copyright the piano yoga. That's the next.
But I have to tell you, it works like a charm, and so. I find if I have only a few minutes to warm up, I'm going to tend to start with something like that because then my hands feel ready, especially because my hands get cold in air conditioning. So, and a lot of places are overly air conditioned. So, if I have the choice to do that, I find I'd rather do that than start launching into fast scales or anything, which I can do, except it's not necessarily so efficient. So that was the same thing I was showing a student, the same student I was talking about the other day, when she was feeling a little unbalanced, starting with scales. I said, okay, let's get your balance point going. Right? And so, and another thing, it's really good for little kids because, little kids, when they collapse their fingers like this, I made up a word for it. We call it splodge. And they get it perfectly when I say, you see your splotch here? And then they try to fix it and they go up like this or whatever they do. And it's like, it has nothing to do with that. And it has nothing to do with finger strength. It's just a good landing point. So, so when I work with them and I show them just what that is, Carlos used to talk to me about this with tone and certain things that I was looking for. And he would sit and say, okay, and just show me how he felt with the key and the tone that he was making. Not that we don't teach each other per se in that sense, but every so often one of us will sit with the other and say, how's this, how's this, how's this? And I found
isn't it amazing how, as musicians, and even though we've been doing it for many years, all of us, how we're always learning. I mean, I'm fascinated by that. There's so much more to learn. The more I learn, I'm always.
It is amazing. I mean, you probably remember, you have seen it, the Ricardo Muti video about to teach this policeman to conduct and to make it. And he said, and then you go like this, and then you finish, and then you wait for, and then
you look up at the heaven.
I mean, they're only
so
two.
Often, you're so.
I love it. And don't look at them because they're gonna say, what is he thinking of? But then at the end, he talks about his teacher, who was 90 years old, and he said that his teacher said, it's so sad to think that I'm close to death when I'm still learning so much. And that's a wonderful thing. But you learn. This is the beautiful thing about, and I believe in other disciplines too, in medicine, for instance, that people learn every day, and in history and in law. And whatever, it depends on your mind. If your mind is active and young, in like the song says, young.
Music always keeps us young in a way because it's such a well of joy. We have a question from the audience. Do you guys have activities you like to do outside of music?
Funny. I mean, I cook. I love to cook. I am a very good cook. I have to say it because
he married me.
Well, Allison's mother asked me one day, "When did you learn to cook so well?" And I said, "When I married Allison."
He does most of the cooking here, and that's the truth. I can, but
Allison cooks.
But I often don't have the time or the patience. And Carlos gets very creative when he cooks.
Not surprising.
I
well,
but we both love to travel. And this has been one of the things that we resent about, we suffer because of the pandemic. But we've been all over the world, to Shanghai, to Japan, to East Europe and to Scandinavia, South America, the waterfalls and things like that. And it's too bad that we can't travel now. I mean, we can, but it's not enjoyable.
Well, I do hope that comes back because we're all missing. None of us have ever been home this long, and it's kind of like, boy,
no.
We're all trying to say, how can we get this interesting? And everyone's working on their house.
I know.
Well, we've done a lot of work on ours, and there's some more work that we're planning to do on our house, as a matter of fact. But we've also, our daughter set up a raised garden and some other stuff. So we've gotten really into our plants in a way that we hadn't before. And,
Right.
She turned our backyard into this wonderful oasis while she was here. And it's really, we love going out there and being able to sit out there with a glass of wine or whatever and just enjoy the fact that she redid our deck. And we also built a patio in, and she found furniture online that she just refurbed that's just beautiful and comfortable. We have 2 grills outside, so Carlos grills. We have one that's gas and one that's charcoal that she got for us, and all sorts of things like that we've gotten into. We both read a lot too, things like that. I also like to play word games and do crossword puzzles and stuff like that. I love that kind of stuff, especially like
active mind. I'm the same way. I love to do puzzles, and I just love that.
Oh, she loves puzzles. She,
the New York Times, the Saturday, the Sunday puzzle.
That's it. In about
it takes me about 45 minutes to an hour usually. But I grew up with that because my grandfather, when he was alive, did them, and my mother still does them. And my mom and I, when I was growing up, would sit together, and we used to do them together. And so it's something that kind of thing I really enjoy. Carlos's reading taste is really very eclectic, and of course he's bilingual. So he's reading in Spanish, he's reading in English. He also speaks pretty darn good Italian, and so he can read in Italian. I don't speak it well at all, but I can read enough. Same with Spanish. I don't speak it well. I can read enough. With French, I can read enough. I'm not conversant really in any of it anymore, but
French
I used
well.
it. French I used
You have to be there, right? You have to be there a bit to kind of absorb it, and it's like my Italian.
And the same way, if we were to go to Argentina now, and I'm there for a few days, I'm going to get a lot of my conversational skill back. I was never fluent, but I got to the point of being. I got fairly comfortable.
You'll be able to take
I could go anywhere and talk to a cab driver. Oh, we had a funny story with cab drivers in Argentina once, though, which is completely off the track here, but okay. Our very first trip to Argentina, and it was our honeymoon, and I was very in the early days of pregnancy too. And one day, and I was in those days, it was really safe to be around in Buenos Aires on my own. Not as much now, but it was then. And one day I had to hail a cab. I got a cab driver who had lived in Queens for many years, spoke great English, had heard of Carlos actually, right? Took me wherever was going. The next day, I'm meeting up with Carlos, and we hail a cab, and I get the exact same cab driver.
Same cab driver.
And
now you have to.
What are the odds
There's
of
like
this?
15,000 cabs.
And we're like, oh, hello. And Carlos was like, you know each other? And I said, you're not going to believe this, but this is the cab driver I had yesterday.
Right.
And it was
things like that happen. That's when you want to open
That's
the
amazing. You should be
book,
playing the lottery that day.
Unbelievable.
Right,
It's
exactly.
like, I mean, that's the only time in my life that anything like that ever quite happened. But in such a huge city, for that to happen was like, what? Please.
But I mean, we didn't talk about this. Allison has a first cousin whose husband was a drummer, and who I met in the south of Argentina, in Patagonia. This guy, his name was Ed Uribe, very good drummer, and he was playing with Ray Barreto, who I had played before with, And we met there in a concert, and as I said, in the middle of nowhere. And then we had a barbecue at 4 or 5 in the morning, and we became friends. And later on, in the United States, he asked me to play for a demonstration CD on a book that he was writing for percussion. And so I did. I played some patterns. The book was out and whatever. And I didn't know Allison at that time. But when my first wife died, and Allison had met me, and later on we started going together. Allison was in a family reunion, and Ed was there. And, they're first cousins. So all of a sudden, Allison is saying, and I'm going out with this musician. Who? Carlos Franzetti. And he said, well, what happened wasn't he married? And then, Allison explained, but this is incredible. This is back to the Carl Jung book of,
it is
wild. And,
and then Robin and Ed came to a concert of mine, right? And we were playing, this was the trio, and we were playing not only music by Carlos, but also he brought us some music. He had been in Italy, in Milan, and brought some music back for us that we played too. And the whole group of us went out afterwards. My dad was still alive then. He was at the concert. And he's like, who's this guy who keeps staring at you? And I said, oh, that's Carlos Franzetti. And now Dad didn't come out with us that night. But then a number of months later, we were engaged to be married. And Carlos is working on a song demo, Lucy Sombra. And Ed was the drummer on it, right? And I ended up doing vocals on it. So just because they happened to need me, I was there, I did it. And so that was the first time we were together when we knew we were getting married. Ed, unfortunately, now is deceased, but
but it came as I said, first Leo Greenhouse. Who knows the guy,
and that's music, right? That's the whole musical world,
right?
And
wow. It's such a pleasure to speak to you both. You're both such vibrant people, and make a great team, obviously. And
well, thanks.
So much.
Not like we have nothing to say, right?
Yeah, I love it. I have to have you guys back on Music Matters. I can't wait to have you back on again. This has been such a pleasure of a conversation. So you let me know. Get you back.
Same here in the conversation. Well, we would love to send you some material that we have, a DVD actually. Which is pretty
hopefully
funny.
The next time we come on, you could be in the studio possibly, or we'll figure out a way to do it.
That would be great.
That would be great.
Yes, I'll get your mailing address from you later so we can send you a couple physical things like this DVD that we did. It was done in Argentina, and we're both playing and taking turns conducting too. And we're also interviewed. So Carlos is speaking mostly in Spanish with subtitles, and I'm speaking one line in Spanish, and I said, no, that's it. I'm speaking in English. And you see this interchange between us, which gets to be very funny. What you don't hear is that they managed to cut out the fact that the guys who were filming us were cracking up at some of what was going on too. So it was. We did some really.
I can't wait to see that. So where can people go to find out more about each of you? Where can people go to see what you're up to, and where can they go to find out more?
Well, there's Facebooks and things like that. If they follow us and they can look at our pages, Carlos Franzetti.
Our websites need to be rebuilt,
Brewster,
so they're currently down. And one of these years we're going to get around to that.
We are there.
But
there are some things on YouTube. There are some videos of Allison playing. There's some videos of me playing.
Instagram, LinkedIn, all that. Spotify,
Amazon, in Amazon,
Apple Music.
Yes, if you go in Amazon, you'll find a lot of Spotify. I don't know. We're pretty much covered, by several.
I encourage people to go check out both of these incredible artists and the projects that they're doing. Two wonderful, wonderful creative people, and a beautiful, beautiful partnership as well. So thank you so much for joining us, both of you.
Well, thank you
so much for having
wonderful.
us,
It's been wonderful.
We'll do this again, and look forward to watching you both make music again soon.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, that'd be great.
And in live,
that would be
live
a beautiful
in the
thing.
same room.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us. I'm music manager Jason Tramm. Please remember to subscribe to us on YouTube or all of any of our social media platforms. You can find us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, you name it, Twitter, all of us there. You can listen to the show also on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Of course, you can go to our website at www.jasontram.net to see our almost 200 past episodes. Thank you so much for joining us, and remember, keep music alive.